Welcome, sleepless spirit. I'm your storyteller tonight, here to guide you gently into the shadows of slumber, where dreams take over and worries fade away. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more bedtime tales, whispered just for you. Let me know in the comments, where in the world are you watching from, and what time is it as you listen tonight? And if there's a story you've been longing to hear, something spooky, something comforting, tell me. I'm always listening. Now, tuck yourself in. Let the darkness wrap around you like a warm blanket. It's time to let go and drift into the story. Greetings, drowsy spirit. Tonight, I will tell you a story that will help you fall asleep soundly. Remember to subscribe for more bedtime stories and like the video before we start. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is in the comments section. I would also love to know what story you would want to hear next. The night everything started to fall apart in ways I never would have imagined. I was 23. I wasn't searching for something significant at the time. I had recently ended a 2-year relationship that had left me exhausted. I so told myself that I needed a vacation. However, life has a humorous way of bringing individuals into your life at unexpected times. In Austin, Texas, it was a Saturday evening. I was urged to attend a rooftop party downtown by a buddy. I nearly declined. He continued calling me a hermit and said, "Come on, man, even though I was exhausted from working 2 shifts at the warehouse. You're sitting at home and playing Call of Duty is a waste of your 20s. So I went. Rachel and I met there. You couldn't ignore a woman like her. Her magnetic energy permeated everything in her vicinity. She laughed loudly at everything and threw back her long red hair as though everyone was laughing at her joke. People were drawn to her by nature. And me, I was merely attempting to appear less socially awkward while sipping a beer close to the bar. She saw that I was staring. I turned my head immediately, but it was too late. "You always this serious?" she inquired, putting her head on the counter and looking directly into my eyes. I stumbled. "Well, not at all. Simply exhausted." "Good," she said with a grin. "Serious people irritate me. You must relax," I chuckled. She caught me off guard, so I was a little nervous. Conversation flowed fairly easily after that. She told me she wanted to launch her own clothing line, but was employed in digital marketing. She was driven, ambitious, and unyielding in her beliefs. And I was just a little man who makes a living by stacking boxes and loading pallets. She appeared really interested in me, though, for some reason, we exchanged phone numbers at the end of the evening. We went on our first date 2 days later. With Rachel, the first few months seemed like a dream. "Good morning, handsome," or "don't forget to eat lunch," were among the many texts she sent me. Additionally, I felt seen in a way that I had never experienced before. We spent the weekends together, cooking together, checking out new bars, and binge-watching television. I didn't care if my friends made fun of me by saying I was whipped. One night, my friend Louise made a joke that said, "Man, she's got you smiling like a damn kid." I gave a shrug. "Yes, but it's nice, dude. I mean, she truly understands me." There was no denying the chemistry. Everything was exciting because of Rachel's passion and fun. She would press me on whatever I was unsure of. "Stop thinking too much. Simply do it. You're not as good as you think you are. Give up hiding behind your fears." And I took her word for it. However, I was unaware at the time of how subtly controlling people may enter your life under the pretext of love. It began modestly. "Don't wear that shirt, please. That color on you bothers me. Why do you spend out with Luis once more? He's a terrible influence. You ought to resign from your warehouse position. You're beneath it." I dismissed it at first. Everyone has their own tastes, don't they? She was also quite persuasive and convincing. But gradually, the recommendations became into demands. I was chatting with the bartender one evening at a bar. A casual conversation about the awful music selection. After that, Rachel's smile froze, and she blew up when we got in the car. "Who was that?" "In front of me. You dare not flirt with anyone." "What, baby?" I wasn't being flirtatious. In fact, we were discussing Nickelback. "Aaron, don't gaslight me. I am aware of what I observed. Although it was the first fight, there would be others. Before long, she was scrutinizing everything I did, my social media accounts, my phone, and even how long it took me to reply to SMS. For each minute I was apart from her, she insisted on explanations. Nevertheless, she always got me back up whenever she broke me down. The only reason I feel envious is because I adore you. I own you. That's how profound this is. All I need to know is that you will always be there for me. And I swallowed my doubts because I wanted to believe in us. Rachel moved into my flat almost a year later. It was thrilling at first, waking up next to each other, talking late into the night, and cooking together. It didn't feel like my place, though, very soon. The closet was stuffed with her clothes. They removed my posters. She even enjoyed the food in the refrigerator. Almond milk, expensive treats I couldn't pronounce, and exquisite cheeses. I reminded myself that relationships required compromise. However, I didn't anticipate that compromise would result in submission. She would say bluntly, "You're not going to your mom's this weekend." Why not? She has inquired about me. Since I stated so, "You're with them for enough time. How about me?" And the arguments were vicious if I argued. Before the guilt trips began, she would yell, hurl objects, and call me weak and pitiful. "Don't bother returning if you go. You abandon me just like everyone else. If you ever leave me, I'll ruin your life." I became aware that I was stuck at that point. I was unsure of how to defend myself without losing everything. She was aware of it. She smirked and took out her phone during a particularly heated argument one evening. "You think you can just walk away from me? Remember, I am covered by insurance." "What the hell are you talking about?" I responded. She rotated her screen to face me and tapped it. My blood froze. She had screenshots, which were evidence of my work from nearly 2 years prior. I had stolen money from the register at my last job when I was penniless and in need. A few $100s. A foolish error. Rachel had copies of emails and even a grainy video clip stored, but I assumed no one noticed. "Do you genuinely believe that your inner demons won't come out?" She gave a sneer. "Aaron, just click. That's all you need to die." I had trembling hands. "How on earth do you have that, Rachel?" She merely grinned. "I've changed my ways. Take a seat. You won't be leaving." I had trouble sleeping that night. I became aware that she had total influence over me. She would destroy me if I left. I was her puppet if I stayed. Hatred steadily started to grow within of me. Like fog, the sadness crept in. I quit hanging out with friends. I no longer called my relatives. I was no longer able to identify myself in the mirror. She went too far, too. One morning, she barked from the couch. I was brewing coffee. "Go get my dry cleaning, please. I am unable to. In an hour, I have work." Was I stuttering? Proceed. Something broke inside of me now. The mug broke when I slammed it down so forcefully. "No," I muttered. Startled, she blinked. "What did you just say?" I replied. "No, I'm not your damn servant." She squinted. She got up, crossed the room, and gave me a forceful face smack. "Your last warning was that." She gave a hiss. The anger I had been suppressing for months suddenly erupted. I was unable to think clearly for days following that. I had a lot of fantasies about getting away from her and escape her control, but every scenario seemed unfeasible. Up till the night I gazed at the rat poison bottle beneath the sink. I can't even recall reaching for it. I only recall trembling while holding it in the kitchen. "This is crazy," I said to myself in a whisper. "What the hell are you doing?" However, the idea continued to bother me. I couldn't continue in this manner. She had ruined my entire being, and I wasn't prepared to die if it were just she and me. My heart was racing when I woke up earlier than normal. She was asleep upstairs. I went to the kitchen and prepared her favorite dish, orange juice, bacon, and scrambled eggs. I poured the poison into the glass, my hands shaking as I twisted it open. She didn't even give me a look when she came down, simply sat and browsed through her phone. She said, "You had better not overcook the eggs again." When I said, "Try the juice," my voice cracked. She scowled as she sipped. "Tastes weird." Then she pushed the drink in my direction. "You sip it." I was filled with panic. "I'm not thirsty." She looked up abruptly. "Sip it," she screamed and lunged across the table. When I hesitated, something broke inside of me. I took hold of the glass, clamped it down on her throat, and gripped her jaw. She tried to scratch at me, coughed, and gagged, but I held on. Then she began to convulse. Her mouth went white. She rolled her eyes back. She twitched, gasping for breath, and fell to the ground. My heart pounded so loudly that it overpowered everything else as I stood there motionless. The silence was terrible. When she eventually stopped moving, I refrained from crying. I refrained from screaming. I simply felt as though a chain had been severed. After squeezing clothes into a suitcase, I departed. I didn't even glance at the flat from behind. I was already traveling north by dusk, using contacts who assisted me in changing my identity. I managed to enter Canada by the following week. 7 years later, I go by a different name and reside in a little mountain village. My 2 girls believe I hung the moon, and my wife is unaware of my background. I'm viewed as a family man here, the person who waves to the mailman and grills burgers at neighborhood parties. To tell the truth, I have no regrets about it. Not for a moment. If anything, I'm sorry it didn't end sooner. Not for a moment. If anything, I'm sorry it didn't end sooner. When Emily and I broke up, it felt like tearing off a piece of your own flesh, which is exactly how I never imagined it could feel. Before the last straw, the disagreements had been going on for months. But more than anything else, my animals were the thing that constantly caused us to drift apart. My 2 cats, Sam and Oscar, and my German Shepherd, Roy, were more than simply pets to me. Really, they were my children, my family. When Roy was on the list to be put down, I saved him from a shelter and had owned him since he was a puppy. I took in Sam and Oscar after their owner, a friend of mine, died suddenly. They were mine from that moment on. I took care of them, fed them, and protected them. For me, that obligation was crucial. Emily, however, detested them. Did every time. "David, they're filthy." When she would snap, she would dramatically wave her palm in front of her face. "It smells like a damn zoo here. They're not odorous. You simply dislike animals." I'd fire back, because my garments were covered with their shedding, due to the dog's tendency to slobber on the floor, as I am unable to even sit on the couch without being covered with cat hair. Day in and day out, it was the same conflict. Even though I loved Emily, I found it increasingly difficult to ignore the reality that she would never be able to perceive my animals in the same way that I did. They were dirty invaders to her. They were home to me. She didn't simply abandon me when she eventually packed her bags and departed. We lost years of our history because of her, and the silence that followed didn't feel like relief, even if it should have. It was oppressive. Moving was the only option available to me. Before I entered the picture, she owned the house we had been sharing. I then began looking for a new location where it would just be Oscar, Roy, Sam, and me. A place to start afresh, somewhere peaceful. I wound up in a 2-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of town, where the gas stations disappear into vast lengths of deserted road. After all, the landlord didn't care that the building was old. It was likely from the 1950s, had broken brick siding, and the stairs creaked every time someone climbed it. The only thing that mattered were pets. However, I became aware that something was strange the first night. With his tail tight and his ears perked up, Roy walked the living room back and forth, as if he was trying to hear a sound that only he could hear. 4 hours. Sam stayed hidden beneath the bed and never came out. Oscar sat near the hallway, looking as though he had just received a static electricity shock. I made an effort to laugh it off. I mumbled, "New place, new smells," rubbing behind Roy's ears. Adjustment takes time. However, things didn't improve. By the 3rd night, Roy was growling into the corners of the room, his teeth bared, as if he were prepared to defend me from something I couldn't see, rather than growling at shadows. Sam's paws bled from scratching at the closet door. Oscar perched on the dresser, his eyes so wide they seemed to have split his face in two as he gazed into the empty hallway. I tossed my keys on the counter and mumbled, "Jesus, guys, one evening after work, I'm also becoming paranoid because of you." When I got home, the flat was constantly in ruins. Picture frames were knocked down and plates were smashed. One evening, a chair in the center of the living room toppled over. Additionally, Roy sat there and looked at me as if he wanted me to comprehend something. At last, I made the decision that enough was enough. I installed a security camera in the living room because I thought the cats might be crazy or Roy might be becoming crazy. I almost puked after watching the video the following morning. Everything appeared normal at first. The cats were skulking around anxiously as Roy lay on the rug. Then all of a sudden, Oscar and Sam halted. Their ears flat, their tails puffed, their eyes tracking something that wasn't there across the room. Then, as if something had lunged at them, they hissed and screeched and ran in different directions. Roy got to his feet, but he just gazed without barking. His body was stiff, his head cocked, and then the chair I had discovered the previous evening toppled over, slowly rose off the floor on its own, and then slammed down with such power that the picture frames shook. I stopped the video and stared at the motionless frame of my chair in the living room. What _ I secretly said. I saw Roy on the television at that point. He was looking away from the chair. His gaze was fixed on the doorway, and as I sat at my desk in real life, I saw that he was doing the exact same thing. I looked around. Oscar was sitting on the counter with Sam. They both laser focused on an area directly behind me. Roy, my voice broke. He began to bark. The area directly next to me, not the wall. Something gave me a forceful shove before I could move at all. My back hit the wall with such force that I was exhausted. Then I sensed it. I was being pulled across the floor by something encircling my ankles. Stop, please. Clawing at the coffee table, the rug, anything I could get hold of, I yelled. My arm struck the wood. I was dragged like a rag doll even after my head struck the ground. Roy rushed, his fangs snapping at the void, but it continued. Like a truck parked on me, the pressure in my chest burned. Air screamed out of my lungs. I believed I was going to pass away. Then there was quiet. Everything ceased. With trembling hands, I rushed to approach the kitties and shoved them into their container while gasping, "Sam, hurry up." "Oscar, hurry up," I gasped, still focused on the unseen figure. Roy snarled as he circled me. I snatched up the carrier, clipped his leash, and ran to the door. With my creatures clinging to me for dear life, I tore down the creaking stairway. At that moment, I noticed her. An elderly woman was standing at the landing, as though she had been roasted alive. Her skin was black and scorched. She leaned on a cane and her mouth hung free, swinging awkwardly. The sockets where her eyes should have been were still curled with smoke. At first, she remained motionless. She simply looked at me, or at least turned to face me. Then she shuffled ahead as the cane shook. I dared not turn around and ran out of the building into the night air. Days later, when I went back in the middle of the day to get the remainder of my belongings, an elderly neighbor who had lived in the building 4 years stopped me. "Hey," he murmured, his voice lowered. "A few weeks ago, I witnessed a woman arrive here with another woman. Her hair was red, seemed really irate. It sounded like she and her companion were having a disagreement." My blood turned cold for this older woman. "Red hair," he gave a nod. "Yes, your ex resembled both her and the elderly woman she was seeing. She's well known in the community. They claim that she is a witch or something. People dislike her, always carrying charms, small bags, etc. She didn't have one when she left, but she did have one when she arrived." My throat was dry as I gazed at him. "Are you implying that Emily brought a witch with her?" He gave a shrug. "I'm only sharing my observations with you. I didn't argue with Emily. I didn't confront her, and I didn't even stay to properly pack things. I packed my dogs into the car, grabbed what was important, and drove till the city vanished from my rearview mirror. Thank God, I never saw her again, and I never looked back or informed anyone where I went. I never imagined that the conclusion of my longest relationship would seem more like a nightmare than a separation. It's often said that you can't truly know someone unless you observe them under stress. In retrospect, I believe I was always aware of aspects of Marissa that I was reluctant to acknowledge. However, Love tends to hide the flaws until it's too late. We first connected in a tiny coffee shop on Denver's North Side in the spring of 2015. For the time, I was 26 years old and working for a logistics company, just making ends meet in a job I didn't enjoy. She entered with her hair in a bright red hoodie, tangled, unkempt, yet somehow ideal. She exuded a certain intensity that made her stand out from the din of daily existence. Before I could respond, she slipped her latte onto my table and said, "Hey, do you mind if I sit here?" I chuckled. That's more of a statement than a question, I suppose. Then we clicked. Talks evolved into dates. Together, dates evolved into weekends. And a year later, we were in a modest apartment in the heart of the city. Marissa was a graphic designer by trade. She was also skilled at it. I keep seeing mock-ups of some oddball logo or edgy campaign. Despite her occasionally erratic income, I appreciated her inventiveness. It was good for the first 2 years. Excellent. She was liked by my pals. My mother loved her. She also appeared sincere in her happiness with me. "You make me feel safe," she would mumble as she curled up against me on the couch. "Are you aware of that?" And I took her word for it. However, that's also when I began to see the first indications of what my brother Alex subsequently referred to as the warning flares. Marissa detested the mention of money. She would shut down if I brought up savings or debts. "Why do you have to make numbers the center of everything?" She would lose her temper. Maybe I just brought it up incorrectly, so I would laugh it off. And her jealousy came next. It began modestly. Late at night, she would query, "Who's that?" if my phone chimed. Sharp, yet not playfully. She once discovered a picture of me standing next to an accounting woman at a co-worker's retirement celebration. After 10 minutes of staring at the photo, she said, "She's too close to you." I dismissed it, telling myself, disputes arise in every relationship. We had been together for 3 years. By the summer of 2018, I made a proposal at that point. As the sun fell, the mountains behind us glowed orange as we arrived to Estes Park. She sobbed and said yes before I could finish my statement. Even though I was trembling when I took out the ring, everything seemed right again for a while. However, my family wasn't rejoicing in the manner I had anticipated. One evening, my dad, who started a tiny construction business from nothing, sat me down. "Son, listen," he continued, urging me to have a drink of whiskey. "I like Marissa. I do. But in this family, I've witnessed far too many marriages fail. You must defend yourselves. A prenuptial agreement is necessary." I let out a groan. "Come on, Dad. In essence, that means I don't believe her. Trust isn't the issue. The goal is to avoid being foolish." He fired back. Alex even added his voice. "Consider it similar to auto insurance. Even if you don't intend to crash, you are still covered." I detested it. It was awful to think of placing paperwork between me and the lady I loved. I did, however, agree to at least discuss it with her after weeks of pressure. The trickiest thing was figuring out when to do it. Every time I considered it, I recalled how guarded she was when the topic of money was raised. I was aware it would land incorrectly. Even though the wedding was 3 months away, my family was adamant about it. Something foolish, a social media video, sparked the fight. I attended a co-worker's birthday celebration on a Friday night. Marissa claimed to have stayed at home due to a migraine. One of my college pals dragged me onto the dance floor during the celebration. We were just laughing and going back to the early 2000s. Nothing crazy. Retro tune. After someone recorded it and uploaded it, Marissa was destroying my phone in 20 minutes. When I replied, she yelled, "Who the hell is she?" "Calm down, Marissa. Leah is the only one." Together, we attended college. It isn't anything. Nothing. You treat her as though she were your girlfriend. Do you consider me foolish? With my heart racing, I drove home from the party at that same moment. She was pacing the living room, with her hands shaking and her eyes crimson as I entered. She gritted her teeth and replied, "You embarrass me." It was a dance, Marissa. That's all. Not much more. Her eyes squinted. "You have something to conceal. You constantly bringing up money because of this. Your family hates me because of this. Admit it. I made the error at that very moment. Before I could stop them, the words came out. In fact, I do need to discuss money with you. According to my dad and Alex, we ought to get a prenuptial agreement, she read after her face turned white. A prenuptial agreement, she spit. That's what this is all about. Then, you're already organizing your getaway. No, it's only a safety measure. Underscore you don't believe me. 3 years later, after everything that you think I'm a gold-digging bitch because I gave up for you. She slammed the door so forcefully that the frame shook as she rushed out. I stared at the ring box on the coffee table till 2 in the morning. The following morning, she returned with puffy eyes. If you need a contract to trust me, she explained icily, then I'm not the woman for you. Then everything got out of control. Every discussion turned into a brawl. She kept bringing up that video and twisted it into evidence that I was unfaithful. My father kept asking if I had completed the prenuptial agreement. I had the impression that I was being torn in two. Marisa had attended her friend's bachelorette party on the night everything went haywire. She consumed too much alcohol. Hey, her friend texted me. Just so you know, she's not in a good place tonight. I then learned that the identical dancing video had been shown to her once more. This time, though, it was altered to appear more personal, with subtitles like caught cheating, around midnight. Alex and I were at my place, calmly talking about how to make things better, when her hammering fists caused the front door to rattle. Nate, open the fucking door. You're in there, I know that. She was a complete mess when I let her in. Eyes blurry, hair wild, makeup smeared. She lost her temper the moment she laid eyes on Alex. Did you even bring it up again? What? Getting together to attack me? I held up my hands and whispered, calm down, Marisa. Her nails brushed my face as she shouted and grabbed at me. She bit his hand hard enough to draw blood, despite Alex's attempts to restrain her. She flung a ceramic vase at me after grabbing it off the shelf. Just inches from my head, it broke against the wall. You'll regret this, she cried out. I'll slit your throat in your sleep before I sign your goddamn contract. It dawned on me then that I no longer knew her. This was not the woman who curled up on the couch with me. This person was insane. A neighbor called, and the police arrived. She was taken into custody on charges of domestic abuse. More shocked than anything else, I delivered my statement numbly. She was released from jail the following morning to spending the night there. Perhaps we could still discuss and salvage anything, I reasoned. I hate you, she replied, staring me in the eyes when I arrived at her flat. Never again come close me. That was the end of it. Man, sometimes life shows you the truth in the ugliest way possible. Alex subsequently told me, perhaps you first escaped a gunshot. I didn't think he was real. I felt terrible, heartbroken, and wondered if I was to blame for everything. Years later, though, I see he was correct. The issue wasn't the prenuptial agreement. The issue wasn't jealousy. The issue was Maris's inherent blackness. I didn't want to see, and I finally let her go the night she revealed that darkness to me. Let her go the night she revealed that darkness to me. It never occurred to me that I would have a story like this one. You know how everyone rolls their eyes, chuckles, and moves on when someone talks about their crazy ex. Yes, until I met Aaron. I did the same thing, and I no longer chuckle when I hear people make jokes about those things. I just recall being 20 years old and a sophomore at Northern California's Redwood State University at the time. I was juggling classes, a part-time work at a campus coffee shop, and my studies in psychology. Although it wasn't easy, life was good. I had my circle of pals, a Jenna, my chaotic but entertaining roommate, and a select group of folks I trusted. Aaron entered my life in a way that initially seemed innocuous. He was tall, humorous in this sardonic, dry way, and very persistent while he was in my philosophy class. He wasn't the kind you immediately recognized, but when he spoke, he seemed to be truly staring at you with focus. One day after class, we actually had our first conversation. He jogged up to me outside the lecture classroom and said, "Hey," he gave me a pen and said, "You dropped this." I informed him it wasn't mine. Well, it is now. He smiled, call it fate. Isn't that corny? However, I chuckled, and it began like way. Aaron appeared normal during the first few months. He would buy me coffee before class, text me good night, and walk me to my dorm. He made all the correct statements. You're not like other girls. With you, I feel like I can truly be myself. Those lines that don't seem rehashed when you're young but rather flattering. However, things gradually altered. It was little at start. In ordinary conversation, he began to quote passages from the Bible. When I first met him, he wasn't religious, but people don't see the demons around them. But I do, he said, abruptly bringing up light and darkness. At first, I thought it was some edgy metaphor and laughed it off. He wasn't kidding, though. We were driving in his car one evening when he came up close to me and said, "You don't hear them, do you?" "Hear who?" I inquired. "The voices. They can be found in the trees and the walls. They provide me with information." I recall attempting to act calm by shifting in my seat. "You're frightening me." "Aaron," odd smile appeared on his face. "Be not afraid. You are liked by them." His actions took a turn for the worse after that. He started to become domineering, texting me all the time and getting upset if I didn't reply right away. Another guy would pout or accuse me of being disrespectful if I laughed at his joke for too long. The tender motions ceased. Surveillance took their place. Constantly observing, constantly asking. Then the violence started. Initially, it was toward objects rather than me. He would pitch chairs, smash bottles, and bang his fist into walls. He cut his hand and broke a picture frame. The first time, he did it in front of me. He didn't even notice that blood was spilling onto the carpet. "Flinch," he told me. "I don't feel pain," while he gazed at the wound. "I'm safe." I knew I had to go at that point. It wasn't easy to break up with Aaron, he sobbed, pleaded, and said he would change. Minutes later, he would become icy, accuse me of betraying him, and call me ungrateful. His number was blocked by me. I believed it to be so, but it wasn't. A few weeks later, I made the decision to grab some ice cream at the student center following a late-night study session. The campus was silent, and the weather was cold. I had the distinct feeling that I was being watched as I passed one of those enormous event billboards. For a little moment, I looked about. Aaron was peering at me from partially behind the sign. My throat tightened with my heart. I accelerated. The sound of my sneakers hitting the pavement was louder than I intended it to be, and every sound felt amplified in the nighttime campus stillness. I heard him, but I dared not turn around again. Footsteps, breathing too near. My hands were shaking so much by the time I got to the student center that I could hardly pay for my ice cream. I took a seat at a table in the hopes that the intense fluorescent lighting would make me feel secure. My phone started buzzing at that point. My friend Leah sent me a note. "You're where? Aaron was just spotted outside your dorm. He's behaving quite shaddily." My phone rang before I could type again. "Remain indoors." There was panic in Leah's voice. "We believe he is armed. We're coming to get you." I almost dropped the phone. Leah and two of my male friends, Chris and Jordan, stormed into the student center a few minutes later. Their eyes darted like animals in a corner, and their faces were pallid. Chris took hold of my arm. "We will not abandon you. Now let's get going." We walked back across campus, them on either side of me. Jordan, who was often the group's quiet joker, was looking at every shadow with deadly seriousness. As we got closer to the dorm, Chris yelled into the darkness, "Police are coming. Aaron, don't even attempt it." It sounded believable, but he wasn't bluffing. Jenna instantly contacted the cops inside my dorm. We spotted him when the rest of us gathered at the window. Aaron was looking up at my window from under a tree. The metal glimmer in his handgun was captured by the streetlight. As his eyes connected with mine, I froze, every muscle in my body tensed. They were untamed, unforgiving, and brimming with a mixture of conviction and fury. "Jesus Christ!" Chris yelled and drew me away from the window, until sirens eventually filled the air. We waited in terror. With their lights flashing, police cars screamed onto campus. Officers with guns poured out, drawn. Aaron ran into the forest. Hours later, they discovered him crouching in the bushes close to my hostel, He was still clutching the gun, a .22 caliber pistol. He allegedly said, "I wasn't going to shoot her in front of the others, just her," as the officers detained him. "She's now the devil's property." Hearing that chilled me more than anything else. I had to preserve her soul. Erin was arrested and subsequently moved to a mental health center. Within the week, I left that dorm. My folks assisted me with packing after they drove up. I was unable to eat or sleep, and I was always looking at every corner of the room. I was plagued by paranoia for months. Years later, the same nightmare still wakes me up occasionally. Erin was staring while holding the rifle beneath the tree. I tell myself that he can no longer harm me and that it's ended. However, I know in my heart that scars like that never truly go away. The darkest period of my life was what began as a relationship full of kind words and promises. And that's the reality about my former partner. Before going through what occurred with Lauren, I had never given much attention to how brittle trust might be. I was 23 years old and still figuring out what I wanted to do with my life after college. Before starting graduate school, I worked full-time at a distribution warehouse in Columbus, Ohio, and shared rent with my friend Chris during my year off. It was at that same warehouse that Lauren and I first met. I was on the logistics floor, and she worked in customer accounts. She was the type of girl who had a gentle charm that filled the room when she laughed, but she wasn't particularly loud. Her auburn hair was typically kept back, and she had a deliberate manner of observing others, as if she were always assessing them before speaking. After we had both stayed late one evening, I asked her out in the break room. She burst out laughing when I made a stupid joke about how the vending machine probably spent more money than we earned during overtime. I just went for it after that. "Hey," I seem to recall stuttering, "would you like to go out to supper sometime? This little Mexican place down the road is familiar to me. Not very fancy." She grinned after tilting her head as if to weigh me. "Yes, Friday night is my off day. The vending machine will start charging us interest, so don't let it hear you." Things proceeded quickly after that. We began dating in earnest within 2 months. Lauren had a tiny one-bedroom apartment about 15 minutes away from me, but I shared a house with Chris. We would alternate between locations, cooking together, watching television, and going out on the weekends. I appreciated that she wasn't ostentatious. She would curl up on the couch beside me, pointing out small details in the film we were watching, and occasionally whisper comments that were funnier than anything in the screenplay. She informed me that she was not a native of Ohio. She had spent some time moving after growing up in Vermont. "Here we have New York, Pennsylvania." She claimed that although she didn't see them often, her family was still in Vermont. When I asked once, she answered, "They don't get me. I came here because I needed space. A new beginning, a new location." I didn't give it much thought at the moment. People shifted. Families were complex. I wasn't going to delve too far. Things began to change around the 4-month mark. It seemed subtle at first. She claimed to have moved shifts, which I was unaware of, and stopped showing up for work as frequently. Then she abruptly gave up completely. She dismissed my question about why. "Nate, I detested that place." "I did, you know. You become exhausted there." "Well, you were the only reason I stayed." Although I didn't like that she left without saying anything, I assumed she would find another work. She didn't, though. Not one she ever mentioned to me. Anyhow, she simply grew more aloof. She would respond, "I'm busy tonight," or "not feeling great," when I asked her to hang out. Our almost daily meetings shifted to perhaps twice a week. Then the text arrived. It was a Tuesday. When my phone buzzed, I was wrapping up a long shift. "Lauren was the one. I believe it's time for us to split up, Lauren. For school, I'm relocating out of state. I apologize." That was all. Just that, no build-up, no face-to-face. I immediately gave her a call. After a few rings, she answered. She spoke in a bland tone. "What the devil, Lauren? What is the source of this?" I inquired. "I informed you. I'm returning to school. I'm not able to go far. This is a better way." "For whom is it better?" "For you. Can't we at least get together and chat? If it's necessary, I'll drive you to your destination. Don't, Nate. Just leave it alone, please. You'll be all right. She hung up before I could answer her. I sat looking at my phone as if it had cheated on me. Although it felt sudden, we had split up on what appeared to be amicable terms, incomplete. I made an effort to accept it. Though, individuals go. Life goes on. I left work late one evening about 2 weeks later. Under the glaring sodium lights, the parking lot was largely deserted, with only rows of cars. I got into my ancient Honda Civic, threw my suitcase on the passenger seat, and was about to turn on the ignition when I noticed something. Over 2 rows sat in an automobile I didn't know. Halfway down, the black sedan's tinted windows rolled down. A woman who resembled Lauren perfectly was behind the wheel. She had the same facial shape and build, but her hair had changed to a darker shade and was shorter and styled differently. Even though it was night, she was on big sunglasses. I initially believed, no way, not feasible. Perhaps it was just someone who resembled her. However, my certainty increased as I continued to stare. As I unlocked my door to exit, she repositioned her sunglasses as if she had sensed my attention to her. The car abruptly slid forward and vanished from the parking lot. My heart was racing as I sat there for a whole minute. I checked her Instagram when I got home, and it was gone. Facebook is no longer available. Snapchat is no longer available. I texted her, but even her number didn't work. She had either erased everything or blocked me. I requested Chris to do some research on her. He shook his head, typed her name into Facebook, and shrugged. Nothing, dude. She's completely wiped. The hair sprang up on the back of my neck. It got out of hand 3 nights later. I saw a grey SUV leave the lot immediately after I left work at around 9 p.m. I didn't give it much thought at first, but it followed me everywhere I went. He changed lanes as I did. I had a tight knot in my gut by the time I was 2 minutes from my flat. I put him to the test, went down a side street and made an arbitrary right turn. He pivoted. I took a step back. So did he. Son of a bitch, I mumbled while holding onto the steering wheel. With my heart pounding, I abruptly pulled over. Like it could stop behind me, the SUV also slowed. However, it sped by and disappeared as if the driver noticed I was pursuing him. I tried to commit the license plate to memory while trembling, but it was too quick and too dark. Nothing after that. No more odd autos. No more sightings. For a while, I told myself that I had overreacted, that perhaps the SUV driver had just happened to be traveling the same path as Lauren in the sedan. But it was gnawing at me in the back. Everything seemed connected: the timing, the way she vanished online, and the obvious fact that someone had followed me home. Months went by. I attempted to move on and dated other people. However, occasionally I would feel like I was being observed in the library, at the grocery store, or on the bus. There was only a glimpse of someone too familiar vanishing into the crowd. I swear I once saw her reflected in the glass doors, a flash of auburn hair, and those same sunglasses when Chris and I were leaving a late-night movie. However, there was nobody there when I turned. My curiosity overcame me last winter. I went to Google and typed her name. Nothing. Not even an old obituary or yearbook. She seemed to have never been there. I'm most haunted by that. Individuals don't simply disappear. They leave a trace of some sort. But Lauren, aside from those little instances when I believe she's still around observing, she was here, and then she wasn't. I occasionally see headlights halting outside my apartment in the middle of the night, lingering just long enough to cause me to freeze. I'll check the blinds, but they've already disappeared. What happened to her is unknown to me. I'm not sure who was driving the SUV or whether it was actually her in the automobile. However, I occasionally get that same icy shiver at the nape of my neck while I'm strolling across a parking lot by myself. The realization that I'm not as isolated as I believe. It was then that I remembered. Not everyone ends their relationship with you. They haunt you. Everyone ends their relationship with you. They haunt you. I never imagined myself to be the type of person who would ask, how close was I to losing my life? After reflecting on a relationship, that each and every time I think about Liam, I do just that. I was 26 years old at the time and lived in a one-bedroom apartment in Cleveland, Ohio, just off Jefferson Street. It wasn't really elaborate. The refrigerator hummed louder than the TV. The bathroom window was drafty, and the cheap carpet curled around the edges. But it was mine. I'd been a medical billing clerk for approximately 3 years, with a consistent salary, respectable hours, and, for the first time, a sense of independence. I wasn't there yet, but the most of my friends were getting married, having kids, and purchasing homes in Palmer or Lakewood. I was flirting with dating again after my previous committed relationship ended 2 years ago. I downloaded the app at that point. I met Liam Carter at that point. He appeared ideal at first. I can still recall our first date. It was late April on a Saturday night. The wind made my eyes water because it was so cold. We got together at the Iron Horse, a neighborhood bar. I saw him right away. His hair was dark and tall, curling slightly above his ears, and pricey leather jacket that appeared to be worn in. When I entered, he got up. He asked with a smile that revealed a chip in his front teeth. "Harper." "Yes," I responded tremblingly as I gripped my luggage. "You look prettier than your photos, damn it." Leaning in for an embrace, he said. It was instinctive, too organic. We ordered drinks and sat at a booth in the corner. The conversation flowed easily and intoxicatingly, as if you've known the person for more than an hour. He claimed to be 30 years old and employed in construction management. Lived along the river alone in a loft apartment. He inquired about my job, family, and musical preferences. I answered, "I'm more into old school stuff, the Eagles, like Fleetwood Mac." "All right," he nodded. "Not the TikTok underscore that everyone is listening to right now." Flattered that he cared enough to agree with me, I laughed. I didn't realize how fast he made things into instances where we agreed. I felt as though I was floating by the end of the night. "Text me when you get home, okay? So I know you're safe," he added as he escorted me to my car and touched my face. Who wouldn't be duped by that? Weekend dates, late night phone calls, and small surprises filled the first month. At work, he would bring me coffee. When my front door lock jammed, he fixed it. When I arrived, he even brought soup. The flu. He seemed too good to be true, according to my friends. Are you certain he isn't a romantic partner? Over drinks one evening, my buddy Rachel made the inquiry. What is the intended meaning of that? I laughed as if it were too soon. Guys who strive for speed. They may be concealing something at times. I gave an eye roll. Not every guy is a dead giveaway, Rachel. She wasn't entirely incorrect, though. Liam had a key to my place by the second month. He claimed it was just in case, such as if I locked myself out, but he frequently utilized it, waiting for me on the couch when I got home from work without warning. I once stepped in and found him sitting in the dark. I clutched my chest and cried, "Baby, you scared me." He chuckled. "Calm down. I intended to take you by surprise." I tried to sound light-hearted when I said, "Well, maybe shoot me a text next time." His smile dimmed slightly. "What? Do you dislike my being here?" "No, that isn't it. I'm just good." Leaning in to give me a kiss, he interrupted me. Avoid overanalyzing it. I had never had that slight twitch in my stomach before. The visits weren't the only thing. Liam had a habit of inquiring about my entire life, including Rachel's residence, my boss's working hours, and even the type of vehicle my neighbor drove. It was just curiosity, he added, but he was very specific in his questioning. He leaned back on my couch one evening after having a few beers and said, "So, did your dad ever hit your mom?" I froze. "What? No. What makes you ask that?" He gave a shrug. "I was just curious. My grandfather was a underscore. I hoped you would understand." I couldn't get it out of my head, but he never mentioned it again. Little by little, things became worse. When I wore dresses, he detested it. To go to work, claimed that they were overly disclosing. He referred to Rachel as a negative influence and didn't like her. He pretended it was a joke. He read my texts over my shoulder. Nevertheless, he had the ability to instantly transform back into Prince Charming, and I held on to that aspect of him. One Wednesday night in June, everything fell apart. A knock on the door interrupted me while I was reheating leftover pasta in the microwave. I wasn't anticipating anyone usually. Liam texted before arriving. He had a bottle of red wine in his hand when I opened the door. He said, "Surprise," with that skewed smile. I made an effort to grin. "It's a weeknight, Liam." I was on the verge of crashing. He walked into the flat, brushing by me. "One drink won't kill you, so go ahead." We were chatting and drinking wine while sitting on the couch, but something wasn't quite right. His leg was bouncing and his energy was frantic. As if he wanted me to notice, he repeatedly checking his phone before putting it down. At that point, my roommate arrived. Melissa had only been here for 2 weeks. She was a friend from childhood who had completed police training and was in need of an inexpensive place to stay while she considered her options. With her badge still fastened to her chest, she entered the room wearing her outfit. She froze when her gaze fell on Liam. "Hey," I blurted out. "This is Liam, Melissa." "Melissa, my pal Liam." Their hands shook rigidly. Liam nodded endearingly. "It's good to meet you." Melissa ducked into the kitchen after forcing a grin. I took a glass of wine and followed. "How are you?" I muttered. She had a pallid face. She took hold of my wrist. "Harper, you must exercise caution. Today at the station, I learned about him. I felt sick to my stomach." "What are you saying?" "His father arrived and lodged a complaint against him." I blinked. "Hold on, what? That isn't possible." I looked at his photo. "Harper, Leon Carter is it?" According to his father, he has been pursuing his stepmother. He took Jules from their home as well. The man is unstable. My chest constricted. I gave a head shake. No, that it might be an error. It could be a different Liam. Melissa tightened her hold. "It isn't. Believe me." Footsteps resonated at that moment. Tossing his cigarette butt into the garbage, Liam emerged from the doorway. "Is everything in here doing well?" Grinning, he asked. I forced a smile on my face. "It's simply girl chatter, yes." Melissa muttered that she was going to call and vanished into her room. He and I spent the remainder of the night alone, wondering who in the world I had allowed into my life. I couldn't take my eyes off of him. Liam took me out to supper at a classy Italian restaurant downtown that Saturday. White tablecloths, candlelight, and violin music playing through the speakers. I set down my fork halfway through my pasta. "Are you withholding something from me, Liam?" His gaze shifted upward. "What are you saying?" "My pal is employed at the station, after all. She had heard rumors about your stepmother and father." His face changed in an instant. His eyes widened and his jaw tensed. "What was it she said?" "That a report was submitted by him." I swallowed hard. That you had a deep affection for your stepmother." His voice was low as he leaned forward. "That's underscore. 4 years. He has been attempting to destroy my life. Don't trust anything." Although my hands were shaking beneath the table, I managed a nod. Melissa brought the news home 2 weeks later. Liam was in custody. After another altercation about his stepmother, he had fatally murdered his father. The entire city was discussing it. I listened to Melissa repeatedly pronounce the phrases while numbly sitting on the couch. He murdered him. He killed his own father. Harper. I reflected on the evenings I had allowed him to sleep next to me. The fact that he had my apartment's key. The times he arrived without warning, waiting in the dark. If I hadn't been warned by Melissa, who knows what may have occurred if I had disregarded that nagging gut feeling. I now remind myself that monsters don't always seem like monsters whenever I pass a mirror. They will occasionally buy you dinner, grin, and tell you to text them when you arrive home safely. Grin, and tell you to text them when you arrive home safely. I had a knot in my gut when I got up that morning. The kind of feeling you get when you're both anxious and excited. The weather was chilly, with a dreary November morning that makes the air sting to breathe. I also didn't press the snooze button for once. I immediately got out of bed. Thanksgiving wasn't the only holiday. My daughter turned 18 on that day. This date had been on my calendar 4 months, and I had been repeating it to myself like a mantra. Just get to November. At last, she will reach adulthood. At last, she will have the freedom to decide. The only reason I manage to get through most days is because of my daughter, Lena. It may sound dramatic, but it is the reality. 10 years ago, my marriage to her mother, Renee, terminated in divorce. I've been living under the shadow of a conflict I never desired ever since. A battle for Lena's affection, attention, and heart. For all those years, Renee was in charge. She portrayed me as unstable. So the court saw me as such. I wasn't flawless. She made me look like a monster by twisting every dispute and conflict, even though God knows I made mistakes. And 4 years, all I could do was swallow my pride and pray that Lena would come to her own realization when she grew up. It was meant to happen today. I took a shower, shaved, and spent more time than I should have standing in front of the mirror, holding two different shirts, one white, one dark blue, to my chest. The white one felt safer and cleaner, but the blue one gave me a polished appearance. I wanted Lena to be proud of me when she looked at me. Don't worry too much about it, I whispered to myself. It's only dinner, just having supper with your daughter. However, I was aware it was more than dinner. It marked the beginning of my genuine chance to re-enter her life. I looked at my new car keys on the dresser, put on the blue shirt, and buttoned my grey blazer. I'll be honest, part of the reason I purchased the car a month ago was for Lena. Maybe to prove to her that I wasn't some washed-up loser, as her mother had often claimed. But not to brag. Perhaps she would see that I was doing well. I picked up a dessert tray from a little downtown bakery and grabbed it. After making apple crumble, pumpkin pie, and other treats, we left. Renee and I were both 22 when we first met. Back then, she had a spark that quickly captured my attention with a blend of kindness and comedy. She wasn't ostentatious, but she was the kind of lady you would want to spend your life with. And that's exactly what we did for a time. Years, however, have a way of revealing a person's true self. That spark eventually evolved into something more sinister, domineering, cunning, and self-centered to the point that it may destroy a person. I lingered, more than I ought to have, in part due to Lena and in part out of love. I wanted her to grow up living with both of her parents, but by the time I left, the fighting had made me lose all sense of who I was. The custody dispute started at that point. At that point, Renee turned into something I can only characterize as toxic. Despite everything, I continued to attend Lena's birthdays. Renee continued to invite me. Why? I will never comprehend. Even though it ended in fighting, I went every year because it was the one day Lena deserved to see both of her parents together. However, this year I hoped that things would finally change. Renee resided in Cedar Heights, a working-class area of the city, in a walk-up or third-floor apartment. My palms continued to perspire as though I were entering enemy territory, even though I had been there innumerable times. Before I could even knock, the door sprang open. Dad, Lena's arms encircled me till they almost knocked the dessert basket out of my grasp. For a moment longer than she probably wanted, I buried my face in her hair and gave her a strong hug. Cheers to your birthday, child. She grinned up at me and said, "Thank you." Her hazel eyes shone just as brightly as mine did. You were missed. I missed you more than you realize. For a fleeting, exquisite moment, we were alone. No fences, no court orders, no resentment. Me and my girl alone. Then, from the kitchen, came Reen's voice. Look who made the decision to appear. My chest constricted at the sound. She came out with the phony smile I'd been so accustomed to, wiping her hands on a towel. Hello, Eli. Renee. I nodded curtly. She turned back toward the kitchen, leaning in and giving me one of those brief, rigid hugs that are more act than affection. Supper is about ready. Don't remain motionless. Be of service. Set the table. Lena muttered to herself as she rolled her eyes at me. Same old Mom. I exhaled deeply before picking up the dessert basket and making my way to the kitchen. Once more, here we go. The table was immaculate. Mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, stuffing, cornbread, and a turkey in the middle. The warm glow of the overhead light even reached the wine cups. Lena was seated in the middle, acting as a buffer zone, with Renee at one end and myself at the other. It was polite at first. Pretending to seem interested, Renee inquired about my work, and I gave succinct responses. I couldn't stop smiling as I listened to Lena talk about her coursework and her intentions to visit Chicago next year. Then the soup was served. As soon as I brought the spoon to my lips, I noticed that it was sour, peppery, and had an unwelcome sting. It's déjà vu. She had already done this. Did you intentionally do this? I put down the spoon and spoke softly. Never taking her eyes off her dish, Renee grinned. What are you going to do? Renee, hurry up. Do you believe I've forgotten? She sliced into her turkey with surgical accuracy and added, I don't know what you're talking about. Something broke inside of me. Tension bubbled over after years of animosity. I growled and pushed my chair back every single time. You can't let Lena be the focus of one day, can you? You must twist it. Make it poisonous. Stop, Dad. Lena spoke rapidly as her gaze shifted between us. I detested the arrogant smile that twisted Reen's lips. Perhaps you would taste things the way they should taste if you weren't so paranoid. That's when I lost it. Before I knew it, I was standing up, my hand tighter than it should have been on her arm. Enough, I yelled. Dad. Lena got up and grabbed my wrist, her voice cracking. Put an end to it. The room exploded. I'm shouting louder than Renee. Lena sobs. It was all blurry, until Lena's words pierced them like a knife. It was damaged by you. She let out a scream. Everything was damaged by you. Leave. Her remarks tore me apart. I let go and staggered back, feeling ashamed as her eyes welled with tears. I snatched up my car keys and hurried out, hardly remembering to get my coat. I hadn't even my phone rang after I had traveled 3 miles. Lena was the one. She was trembling when she said, Help me, Dad. Please return. There's a problem. What? What are you saying? The line died. I thought I could faint from the intense pounding in my heart. With tires screeching on the wet pavement, I whirled the car around, hoping it wouldn't be too late. A shiver went down my spine as I pulled up outside the apartment complex. The entire space was too quiet, and the windows were gloomy. I rushed up the steps, pushed open the door, and then stopped. I was the first to notice the fragrance. Heavy, metallic blood. My eyes then adapted. Lena, and with their ankles bound, blood streaming from their throats onto the hardwood floor, and bruises all over their cheeks and arms. Renee was hanging upside down from the ceiling beams. My knees gave way. No, 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 no. I screamed their names as I staggered onward. Renee, Lena. Their faces were dead and colorless, and their hair fell to the ground. I was unable to even take my phone out of my pocket, since my hands were shaking so much. My voice broke so badly when I eventually dialed 911 that the operator had to ask me to repeat myself 3 times. I was sitting in a puddle of their blood by the time the police showed up, rocking back and forth and muttering. I should have stayed. I ought to have stayed. In any case, they cuffed me, took me out in front of horrified neighbors. After verifying that I hadn't been in the vicinity when the killings took place, they released me a few days later. It didn't matter, though. The damage was already done. No one was ever taken into custody. There were no leads or suspects, just an unresolved wound. Since then, their faces, dangling bodies, and blood trickling like a nightmare on loop have been in front of me every morning when I wake up. I also lie in bed every night and relive that moment at the table, because I know that they might still be alive if I had just swallowed my pride, stayed put, and apologized. Lena could still refer to me as Dad, but all I get is silence. Refer to me as Dad, but all I get is silence. Even though it's been nearly 10 years, I can still clearly recall the first night I matched with Caleb on a dating app. I was 24 years old at the time, attempting to make sense of my post-college existence while residing in a modest 1-bedroom apartment on Riverside, Ohio's east side. I was spending most of my evenings by myself after starting a full-time job as a receptionist at a dentist office. Caleb's profile caught my attention as I browsed through my phone, feeling both lonely and bored. His bio was brief and almost irresponsible, but his photos exuded humor and confidence. He was sipping a beer at a backyard barbecue, wearing a baseball cap backwards and grinning effortlessly. He had the appearance of someone who could quickly make friends in any setting. Without giving it any thought, I swiped right. When it stated, "It's a match," I grinned in that foolish, apprehensive manner that occurs when you're half excited and half uncertain. He was the first to message me. "Caleb, so, are we fabricating a more interesting story or telling folks we met on this site?" Me, "It depends." "Caleb, what's your more interesting story?" "That you were criticizing me for purchasing a Monster energy drink when I ran into you in a bookshop." I laughed much more than I ought to have. He had a way of making discussion flow. 2 days later, we were having late-night conversations. He asked if I wanted to go out to supper within a week. In retrospect, I see how hastily I jumped into things with him. However, it felt like a welcome break at the moment. We went on our first date to this laid-back Mexican restaurant in the heart of La Hacienda. He returned wearing that baseball cap, dark pants, and a simple t-shirt. He possessed a presence even if he wasn't particularly attractive. The way he looked at me across the table gave me the impression that I was the only person in the room, and he was humorous enough to make the waiter chuckle. The first couple of months with him were honestly good, too good. He would send me a good morning text, inquire about my day, and bring takeout when I was ready. Too exhausted to prepare food. Slowly, but surely, things began to shift. We went to concerts, in expensive dive bars, and spent lazy Sundays at his apartment binge watching The Office. It began with brief remarks. "You're going to exhaust that, Caleb." Me, "What's the matter?" "Nothing, Caleb. The only people who will stare are men. That bothers me." I initially brushed it away. The drinking followed. He was always holding a beer. 2, then a few more. His fury came out when he was intoxicated. He would start fights without warning. He would ask me, "Oh, so who were you out with?" If I didn't text him back quickly enough, I saw the cracks after 3 months. After another dispute one evening, I sat on my bed. "I can't do this anymore," I thought as I stared at my phone. So I put an end to it. It was not warmly received by him. "You're discarding this, Caleb. What is it over?" "Because you are important to me." Me, "Since you don't believe me. Since you shout at me. Due to your excessive drinking. You're exactly like my ex, Caleb. Making me the villain all the time. Ignore this." That night, he slammed the door so forcefully that the picture frames rattled as he stormed out of my flat. And that ought to have been it. It was for roughly 6 months. On Facebook, I blocked him. There was no chance of our meeting. The town of Riverside wasn't little, but it wasn't very big either. I never saw him, though. I went on to live my life, work, dating frequently, and move on. Then I received an SMS from an unknown number one random Tuesday afternoon. Oh, I didn't answer. A day later, Caleb sent me a friend request on Facebook. There, he also sent me a message. "Can we chat, Caleb?" Curiosity overcame me against my better judgment. I replied with a simple me text a few days later. "Hello," he answered right away. "Caleb, at last. I've been curious about your well-being. Do you want to get together?" Me, "That isn't a good concept, in my opinion." Caleb, "Whoa, really? After all?" In any case, I forgot to inquire. Then came the name-calling, the insults, and the profanity. Once more, I blocked him. Facebook, the phone, everything. That should be sufficient, I thought. No, it wasn't. My door was knocked on 2 days later. It was an afternoon on a Saturday. I was partly watching Grey's Anatomy while cuddled up on the couch. I wasn't expecting anyone when the knock came. Nestled behind a masonry apartment building, I occupied the first floor. It might have been a neighbor because of the strip mall. I opened the door mindlessly, and there he stood. Caleb, I felt sick to my stomach. Me, "Why are you here?" Caleb, "Calm down. All I wanted to do was talk." Me, "We can have a conversation here. You're not entering. Why are you behaving like I'm a complete stranger?" Caleb, "Come on in." He had lost his smile. His eyes were unfocused and hazy. Intoxicated. Me, "No, Caleb. Say whatever it is you want to say. I simply miss you. All okay, let's get together. Only tonight. Me. No. This is the reason it didn't work. Caleb. You must go. His face contorted. You believe you're superior to me. Caleb. Do you believe that you are flawless? I attempted to close the door, but he pushed it open with his hand. My heart began to pound. Me. Leave. I'll contact the police. I swear to God. Before I could get my phone off the counter, he entered the room halfway. Me yelling, I'm currently calling 911. For a moment, his jaw was clenched as he scowled at me. Then at last he retreated. You're crazy. Caleb, you're crazy. He hurried away, shouting more derogatory things before vanishing into the parking lot. I stood there trembling after locking the door and slamming it. I had trouble sleeping that night. I jumped at every small noise. Perhaps he has received the message, I thought. However, I woke up to a sound at about 2 in the morning. Tap, tap. I initially believed it to be a dream. Then it came, louder than before. It came from the window of the living room. My ground level flat overlooked a row of woods and a rear parking lot. I climbed out of bed. My bare feet felt cold on the carpet as I moved slowly. I froze when I peered into the living room from around the corner. There was a person outside the window, a man with a mask and a black hoodie. Even so, I recognized his physique, posture, and gait despite the disguise. Caleb was the one. He was trying to pry open the window by tinkering with the lock. My heart was racing. I could hardly hear. I took my phone, shut the door, and ducked back inside my room. As I phoned 911, my hands were shaking. 911 dispatcher. What emergency do you have? I was whispering. My former partner is attempting to break into my flat. Hurry up, please. They instructed me to remain silent, stay on the line, and that assistance would be arriving shortly. I tried not to breathe too loudly while hiding in the corner of my bedroom with my phone tight to my ear. He was still tinkering with the window, and I could hear him outside. Then there was quiet. I was calmed by the dispatcher, who talked me through it until I heard distant sirens. In a matter of minutes, the parking area was packed with flashing lights. I could see officers pinning him to the pavement via my shutters. Face contorted in rage, mask off. Caleb was caught in the act. The following morning, I received a restraining order. I didn't see him again after that night. Perhaps he was completely terrified by the arrest. He may have moved away. I'm not sure. However, I constantly remember that night and how close he was to getting inside when I'm lying in bed and hear a strange noise outside. And if I hadn't woken up at that moment, I wonder what may have happened. My previous relationship never came back to bother me as much as it did. Perhaps, in hindsight, I should have recognized the indications sooner. Little things, angry words, and the way she would look at me for too long when she was unhappy. However, I believed it to be typical relationship turmoil at the time. I suppose I was mistaken. I'm Carl Hennon, and I rented a modest home on the outskirts of Dayton, Ohio, back in the late 1990s. It had a sparse front yard, a creaking porch, and a single bedroom, but it was mine. I enjoyed the tranquility of being outside the city, away from the bustle and the incessant chatter of people. For over a year, I had been seeing a woman named Rachel. At first, I found her sharp, stubborn, and wild-side appealing. However, that crazy began to feel more like reckless as the months passed. She was prone to arguments with friends, drank excessively, and lost her temper easily. One cold November night, following yet another dispute, the relationship came to an end. This time, it was something as trivial as my refusal to join her for a drink on a work night. After calling me dull and slamming the door, she told me she was done after a week. To be honest, Carl, I simply don't need you. You're too safe, she replied, smirking slightly as she twisted the knife. I wasn't crushed. Are you hurt? Not smashed, though. I knew in my heart that it wasn't working. Nevertheless, I was hurt when I discovered that she was already seeing another man less than a month later. I felt like I hadn't mattered much at all, not because I wanted her back. So, following a breakup, I did what most people do. I tried not to think about her, kept busy, and concentrated on my work. After a few weeks, Rachel disappeared from my life. Also, I believed. It was late January on a Saturday night. I recall this because of the icy gleam on the roadways outside, and that when I went outside earlier to get the mail, the air felt like a razor against my skin. The TV in the living room was still flickering as I dozed off on my bed. There was a noise that woke me up in the middle of the night. Bang, bang, bang. My front door was being pounded. I rolled over, sluggish, and looked at the clock. 1:57 had began to pound. At this hour, who in heck would be at my door? I stood up, put on a sweatshirt, and made my way to the front room down the dim corridor. By the time I got to the window, the banging had ceased. I slightly moved the curtain aside so I could see what was outside. I didn't see anyone at first. Then I saw a person slicing across my yard in the pale yellow wash of the street light. I felt sick to my stomach. Rachel was the one. Her arms were swinging slightly as though she were intoxicated, and she was walking unsteadily. From behind, her hair looked even and untidy. She often wore an oversized leather jacket when she went out, and I recognized it. What the hell? I said to myself in a whisper. The door was not opened by me. I merely watched her drift, feeling puzzled and frightened, like a phantom from my past, out of sight. I don't believe she saw me because she didn't turn to face the window. I waited, listening, for a few minutes, quiet. Perhaps she simply walked out. After a while, I told myself it was over. I returned to my bed and covered myself with the blanket. Even though my heart was still racing, I tried to calm my breathing by closing my eyes. Then there was another noise, crash, the clear splintering of glass. With adrenaline rushing through me, I jumped to my feet. There was another crash, and then another. It seemed like someone was purposefully breaking all the windows in my living room. What the hell, no, I murmured as I fumbled for the phone on my bedside table. I called 911. My hands are trembling. 911. What emergency do you have? 911. Yes. Hello. My windows are being broken. It's probably my ex-girlfriend. Just now, she came hammering on my door. You must send someone right away, please. My house is being torn apart by her. The smashing went on as I spoke. I cringed at every crash. Fear made every nerve in my body tingle. The dispatcher's tone remained composed. Keep the door locked and remain in your bedroom. There will be officers soon. Never try to challenge her. Sitting on the edge of my bed, I gripped the phone and gazed at the closed door, if it were the only thing separating me from mayhem. The shattering finally ceased after what seemed like a lifetime, but was really only a little more than a minute. Even unsettling was the unexpected quiet. It resonated in my ears. Then I heard her voice outside, very faintly. Do you think you can ignore me, Kyle? Her words were jumbled as she screamed. Do you believe that you are superior to me? Her speech faded into a yailing, angry, broken, and nonsensical sound. At the time, I was unable to make out nothing. I stayed motionless until my front yard was finally illuminated by red and blue lights. With flashlights, the police officers walked across my yard and yelled, "Dun PD, anyone here?" With caution, I left my bedroom, my socks crunching on the glass fragments all over the floor. My home area had the appearance of a battlefield. The curtain was torn, the main window cracked inward, and frigid air rushed through the breach. And Cop was standing there when I opened the door. "Sir, you the one who called?" "Yeah," I responded in a shaky voice. It was my ex Rachel. She just lost it. They looked about the neighborhood and finally located her, staggering down the street with a metal pipe in her hand, roughly 3 blocks distant. She had actually taken it from my neighbor's yard. She was inebriated, angry, and hardly able to think. "Ma'am, you're under arrest," as they cuffed her, I heard one of the officers say. She continued to struggle against their hold while yelling my name. My statement was taken by another officer inside. "Did you have any recent contact with her?" "Not at all. Months have passed since our breakup. I'm not really sure why she came here, but she's been seeing someone else." The officer looked at me pityingly. It sounds like she made a poor choice after drinking too much. We'll proceed from this point. In the days that followed, I attempted to shrug off the entire situation and had the glass replaced. Friends inquired about it. A few chuckled uneasily. I escaped a bullet, according to others. However, each evening after that, when the house became silent, I would remember that hammering on my door at 2 in the morning. Her voice, the sound of glass exploding, yelling in the distance. Heartbreak wasn't what I remembered. It was the worrying that I had once let someone into my outside my window. Life could so easily become a nightmare, and I will always remember that nightmare. And I will always remember that.